To a guest who has been in the middle of all this and who the president just attacked rather directly, attorney and potential Democratic presidential candidate Michael Avenatti. He is representing a new accuser of Kavanaugh, Julie Swetnick. Michael, thanks for getting on the phone with us.
Hi, Ari. How are you?
I'm fine. I guess the first question is, what have you and your client achieved over the course of today in coming forward and releasing this information, but in doing so in a manner that you as a lawyer know is very last minute and according to the current schedule doesn't afford a lot of time for response by the accused or verification by the press, which is interested in getting to the bottom of this new claim?
Well, Ari, a couple things. It's actually not last minute because I surfaced the allegations on Sunday. Generally, we alerted the committee, we alerted the public. The committee did nothing between Sunday evening and this morning, despite my repeated request that they respond to my correspondence. They blew us off for days on end.
And sir, when you say they, are you referring to both the majority and the minority on the committee, or a single party?
No, I'm referring to the majority, obviously, to the chief counsel, Mr. Davis. Blew off my repeated requests for him to get back to me. We provided a significant amount of information. They didn't need the name of my client in order to start the process. They didn't need a sworn declaration in order to start the process, but they blew us off because they don't want the truth to come out. We still don't understand why they're burying Mark Judge's testimony. They're hiding him in some safe house somewhere because they don't want Brett Kavanaugh's best friend, Mark Judge, to testify and come clean about what really happened here. I mean, this is an absolute farce. But here's what I'm going to say about Donald Trump. I am thoroughly enjoying living in your head rent-free, Donald Trump. Thoroughly enjoying living in your head rent-free. It's amazing.
Well, you mentioned that, and you've called in, and the president has responded to you. And previously, he didn't respond to you by name. You had separate litigation, as most viewers know, regarding Stormy Daniels, the NDA, and Michael Cohen. Here is what the president said about you just moments ago today.
Do you think these women, all three of them, are liars? Yes or no?
Have they been what?
Are they liars?
I can't tell you. I have to watch tomorrow. I have to read. I just heard about one a little while ago. I can tell you her lawyer is a lowlife.
The president obviously taking a shot at you, Mr. Avenatti, that is personal, that relates to the idea that people should infer something negative about the client based on you. As a journalist, as a lawyer, that's not necessarily fair with regard to your client. But he's also alluding to something that many other fair-minded people do think, which is that your political advocacy, your plans to potentially run against him, do cloud or at least complicate your role as a person who's just trying to get to the facts here. I afford you the opportunity to respond.
Well, Ari, I think that's a ridiculous criticism. One doesn't have anything to do with the other. That declaration is not a declaration from Michael Avenatti. It's not signed by Michael Avenatti. It is signed by my client, Julie Swetnick. These are her facts. These are her allegations. I am her lawyer. But for Donald Trump to call me a lowlife, he knows nothing about me, knows nothing about the last 20 years of my practice, $1 billion in verdicts and settlements. I'm highly educated. I've been very fortunate over the years, and I would venture to say that I have a hell of a lot more class than Donald Trump has ever had.
Well, Michael, I can't do a tiebreaker on a class competition between the two of you, but can you speak directly to the concern people have? And there are people who are sympathetic to your client, who are critics of Judge Kavanaugh, who think that it would be better to have accusers come forward with lawyers who are not involved in partisan political warfare against this president.
Well, I completely disagree, Ari. Look, there's a reason why people continue to reach out to me and ask me to represent them, and I'm presuming it's because I'm effective. I'm presuming it's because I have over $1 billion in verdicts and settlements. I'm presuming it's because we've been very effective, and I would venture to say incredible advocates for our client, Stormy Daniels. If we didn't get results, we wouldn't be hired. So, you know, to those individuals that think that our clients should hire someone else, I don't know what to tell them. I mean, we've been effective. We get results. It's just that simple.
You mentioned your client, Ms. Swetnick, in the declaration, which was released today. I'll read from it and try to get to the bottom of some of this that's so important because she says in point 13 in this declaration, in approximately 1982, quote, I became the victim of one of these, quote, gang rapes where Mark Judge and Brett Kavanaugh were present. And she goes on to allege a serious misconduct. But even if true, is this essentially an allegation that Judge Kavanaugh was a witness to something that was criminal, that he was in a place he should not have been? Or is there in here an allegation of an actual criminal conduct by Judge Kavanaugh at that time?
Here's what I'm going to say. I'm not at liberty to get into further details relating to that paragraph. The words are on the page. I'd urge everybody to read the words. When my client sits down with the FBI, and hopefully that'll be within the next 24 hours, that's what we want. She's going to provide additional details relating to that paragraph. We're hopeful that Judge Kavanaugh is going to sit down with the FBI. But let me also say this, Ari. There's 12 other paragraphs to that declaration. Mm-hmm. And even if you took out that paragraph, the facts and the evidence set forth in the other paragraphs are very, very disturbing and are in and of themselves disqualifying of this man to ever serve on the U.S. Supreme Court.
I think that's, Michael, I think that's certainly a view that many legal experts and many judicial experts hold, because we're talking about a promotion. That's a point we've made. But when you say you're going to let this sit, the time for letting this sit is over. You are her lawyer. You're speaking out in public. And the question I posed to you before I let you go, to be very clear, to give you an opportunity here, because other people are speaking out, the judge and Ms. Ford are, of course, testifying under oath tomorrow, is, does this, in your view, as her lawyer, allege criminal conduct by Mr. Kavanaugh or not?
Ari, I believe the declaration in paragraph after paragraph alleges criminal conduct against Judge Kavanaugh, and that's one of the reasons why we are seriously considering filing criminal charges relating to Judge Kavanaugh's conduct as well as that of Mark Judge.
Michael Avenatti, an attorney in the news, and for the first time, as far as we know, attacked by the president by name at a press conference tonight, taking time to call in, taking time to deal with some of the questions. I appreciate that, as always, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Ari. Have a good night.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.